So the footage that you're about to watch was shot back in December of 2009, which it won't matter to some of you. Some of you just like watching Dan Barker speak. But it was shot back in December of 2009 at the University of Memphis when he came to speak. But there are a couple of notes I want to make about the video. It was shot using no tripods, so it's all handheld shot, so hopefully it doesn't make anybody too nauseous or whatever. And it was also shot on 3 different cameras. I tried to adjust the footage the best I could, but sometimes the audio gets really low, so I've had to spike the audio all the way up. So kind of be prepared for spikes in audio levels in case you're wearing headphones. I don't want you to blow your eardrums out or whatever. But I just want to kind of make a note of that, just kind of give you a heads up, you know. And but with that said, here's the full Dan Barker speech that I saw. It was good to see him talk. It was interesting to see the guy who wrote Mary Had a Little Lamb talk and meet the guy. But you came in here to see Dan Barker, not me. But do feel free to check out my other content if you wish. Here's Dan Barker.
The reason we're starting a tiny bit late is we're trying to find someone to properly open the meeting with prayer. Are there any city council members here today? Or any members of the clergy? Because you know you can't have a public meeting without prayer, right? How else can you get your business done unless you sanctify it with that, whatever you call it, moment of silence or prayer? Well, thank you, Gene. And thank you, CFA, and thank all of you for coming, and we thank the Secular Student Alliance for helping to sponsor an event like this. This is my 17th event in 17 days, but I go home tomorrow and kind of take it easy for the weekend, so that'll be fun. I was in London for 3 debates, and I got back Tuesday, 2 days ago. Monday night I debated 3 Muslims in London, and one of the debates was on the need for a secular government, and the Muslim was arguing that no government can function unless God is behind it, and secularism is actually a threat to the world, he was arguing. And as I stood up before that audience, I pointed out that I have this red A pin on my coat. Do you know what that is? Does some of you know? Adulterer? Is that the first thing that came into your mind?
The scarlet letter.
The Richard Dawkins Foundation that makes this, it's part of his OUT campaign, that atheists and I guess agnostics need to come out. But I told that audience in London that this stands for atheist, but it could stand for American, although I don't know which would get me in more trouble these days. And there was some hearty laughter there. And especially with Muslims and the Western expansionism and the values of Western, you know, all these issues that are going on. And I was impressed, though. The Muslim debaters were very intelligent, very articulate, and very kind, very good people. And I pointed out that the Muslims, most Muslims that I know at least, are really good people, just like most Christians are good people. Most Jews are good people. And of course, most atheists are good people. We're all just people. And the good values that every religion has, and they all have them, you know, the core values by which we judge that a religion is good or not, the peace and love and cooperation and charity and compassion and accountability and all these things that we say, these are the good values. Well, those are not Christian values. Those are not Muslim values. Those are human values. Those are values that all human beings share. And that's part of the reason that we would judge a religion to be good or bad, is because, oh, those values are good values. Those values transcend the religions. And if you think about it, those values that all these religions have in common, and humanism and non-religion, these human values transcend the religions. It's those values that a particular religion has that differ from the common values. Those are usually not good or not useful values. What kind of food, what kind of day of the week, what kind of artwork you should make, how you should dress, things like that are what divide people. The common values that we all share in this world as social animals that we are things we can all agree on and share with. And I think that's part of what makes America so great, is that we all allow the differences of opinion. We can all disagree with each other and yet find common ground in working together. One of my friends in Atlanta, an atheist, marched shoulder to shoulder with the Baptists during civil rights because he cared about the issues, and he didn't care if they knew he was an atheist or what. It shouldn't have even mattered. What mattered was getting the job done, making the world a better place. In the United States of America, there are millions and millions of good people who don't believe in a God, who pay taxes, who sit on juries, serve in the military, who contribute to charity and work for science and work for beauty and art and literature, and it's our country too. And if we go to a city council meeting to take care of some kind of business, maybe for a zoning variance or whatever, and we're there, and then suddenly somebody gets up and solemnizes the meeting with someone else's religion, and those of us that are outside of the religion, we kind of like look around. What do you do when everyone says, bow your heads and pray? What do you atheists do? Keep your heads open, keep your eyes open, and what? You know, it's very awkward. It's a very unusual thing to be in this meeting. It's supposed to be your meeting. You're there. It's for your business. And yet somebody else's religion is up there as if it were the most natural insider kind of a thing. Well, the United States of America is supposed to avoid those problems. Let me ask you this. How many times does the word God appear in the United States Constitution? How many of you know? Huh? Some of you know, right? Somebody went like this. Yeah, none. 0 times. You'd be surprised. I talk in high school campuses and college campuses around the country, and I ask that question. How many times does God appear in the Constitution? And sometimes high schoolers will say, 12? 18? Like they've heard about the Constitution, but actually haven't read it, and they actually haven't put all the things together. And when you point out that it's 0, they say, "You're kidding! Well, what about in God we trust?" Which does appear on the money, but it's only a Johnny-come-lately. And there is no mention of God. The U.S. Constitution is a godless document. Its only references to religion are exclusionary things. There's nothing pro-Christian or pro-God or pro-religion at all. The exclusionary things is there shall be no religious test for public office. And of course the First Amendment. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. And then the other 4 freedoms that are in there as well. When I was a Christian minister, I thought America was a Christian country. I just thought that because, the founders were all Christians and they came over here to establish a Christian. They were all the values and the 10 Commandments, and that's what I thought. That's what, when I stood in the pulpit, I was so glad to be in a Christian country. Of course, if I thought about it, my dad's an American Indian, and I and my kids are members of the Delaware tribe of American Indians. We're the tribe, the Lenape tribe, that... This is kind of embarrassing. We sold Manhattan for $24 to the Dutch. And my brother says, let's give them the money back. And try to get the island back. And there's no way that's going to happen. But Darrell said, well, maybe we could just settle for the Trump Tower. We could make some kind of a deal. But the Puritans and the Mayflower, they didn't settle this country. They didn't get, this whole manifest destiny thing. When you hear this argument that America is a Christian nation, that's almost a racist argument. It's almost like the only real people are the ones who came over here with a Bible in one hand and a gun in the other because God gave them this land. And we know the story about the governor of Massachusetts. After landing and seeing all these villages that were empty, not knowing that it was disease. It was the germs that had preceded them that had pretty much decimated that coastline. When he stood up to give thanks to God for clearing the way for us to come and settle on this continent. My tribe was Christianized in the 1830s, and my great-grandmother, her favorite song was Rock of Ages. They were all Christian. In fact, our tribe even has, along with the bear claw and the turkey print and the turtle shell, also has a Roman Christian cross on it. And nobody knows how it got there. And I've even asked the tribe, how did that cross get on there? And they said, we're just all Christians. And I said, well, we're not all Christians. We were a Native American Indian tribe with totally different beliefs. And we have these stories of the turtle going down below the water and bringing up the mud and starting the continents, and then the trickster snake Moneta, when it was Nana Bush, the hero, fought, and then the snake went underground and became the Moneta River, which later got turned into a road, and it's now called Canal Street in Manhattan. And you know, I thought those were cute stories when I was a kid. Of course, I didn't believe, you know, the actual turtle and that stuff. Although here come these people from over the water with a book called Genesis with a talking snake and food falling from the sky, and a hand floating in the air and writing on the wall, and people walking on water. Well, those weren't mythical. Those are actually true stories, right? Those were actually real stories. And the Native American stuff, that's just kind of, you know, folklore mythology that's not really real. Well, it turns out that what's real is whoever the conquerors are. That's what the real religion is. But the United States Constitution realized, the people who wrote it realized that religion, for all the good that happens in religion basically is divisive. Religion builds walls. Religion sets up an in-group and an outside group. Religion, if you ignore the stuff that all religions have in common, what it does is it sets up, we are the chosen and they are the damned. We are the elect and they are the infidels. You know, it sets up this unnecessary source of social conflict. There's plenty of reasons for social conflict in the world without religion. So why throw this totally irrelevant and useless and divisive thing into our society? Because we're all just the same animals and the same species. If we could eliminate that, or at least take some of the teeth out of the divisiveness, we would be in a much better world. And our founders knew that. Many of them were religious. Some of them went to church. Some of them prayed. Here's another good question for you who know history. How many official prayers were said at the Constitutional Convention? You know? Yeah? None, that's right. There were none. It is true that Benjamin Franklin made an impassioned plea to have prayers at the Constitutional Convention. And in fact, the religious right sometimes quotes that plea of his. But there was never a second to the motion. It was embarrassing. They didn't want prayers at the Constitutional Convention. There were no official prayers. So if the Constitutional Convention that formed this great nation of ours could get by without any prayers, how come the city of Memphis can't? You know, how come local towns can't seem to get by without these prayers? What's the point of the prayers? You know, ignoring the possibility that there are political points to be made, what's the point of having a prayer? It's something that is totally secular. Prayers which divide, prayers which separate, prayers which are ineffective. I would be the first to get in line and say, let's pray, if somebody could show that prayer made any difference. Prayer makes no difference at all in the real world. Nothing fails like prayer. In the studies I'll show it. In fact, some of the studies show that prayer, people who are prayed for actually do worse if they know they're being prayed for. So if you think prayer is effective, just don't tell the person that you're praying for that you're praying for them. Because if you let them know, people who are being prayed for get more nervous about it. They think something's wrong. It's like if I was getting on an airplane and I saw one of the pilots was praying, I'd get right back off. I think, what is he worried about? I'm not hiring this guy to fly the thing by faith. I'm hiring I'm paying to get on that plane for somebody with expertise that I'm trusting my life to. And when I elect an alder person or a city council member or a president or a governor, I'm electing them to do a job, a secular job. I don't care if they want to go to church and stand on their head and pray in tongues and worship Mother Goose. I don't care. This is a free country. But when I elect them to do a secular job, I want them to do their secular job. And if they're praying about it, to me that's an indication they don't know what they're doing. It's like breaking the rules. It's like hoping, And I know some people say, well, prayer isn't supposed to be magic. It's just a way to kind of honor and solemnize the meeting so that we know that it's serious. How can you solemnize a meeting with talking snakes and food falling from the sky and demon possessions and hells? And how can that solemnize? Wouldn't that make the proceedings ridiculous? If somebody gets up and starts quoting from a book that has all these things in it that are ridiculous, how does that solemnize the occasion? It should make it a meeting to laugh at rather than to to feel solemn by. I know when I was a preacher, I used to think, well, you know, there's a gravity here because there's heaven and there's hell, and we need to be reminded, you know. When you go to court, you have to swear. You know, you put your hand in the Bible as if somehow that made you really tell the truth. Why? Because if you don't, you're going to burn? Is that why? When Annie Laurie and I got married in 1987, we put a lot of planning into this feminist free thought wedding, which was really a lot of fun. And at the end, the judge said, "This is a match not made in heaven, and you may now kiss the groom." It was all that kind of fun stuff. But we went to get our license. We went down to the city county building in Madison, Wisconsin. And as we were filling out the forms and asking the questions, the clerk said to us, "Okay, do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?" And we said, "Oh, well, we're atheists. We don't believe in God. We would rather take the secular affirmation and not the religious oath." We happen to know that in Wisconsin, you have that alternative. You can ask for a secular affirmation. In fact, that's in there because religious people put that in. Religious people who didn't think you should swear. And the clerk got all nervous and she said, oh, and she stuffed on her papers. "I've never had anybody ask for that before." And the secular affirmation, she said, "Oh, okay, let's do this again. Do you affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?" So we had to object again. It just, and you know, that was a small thing, and it was funny, but think about if you're going into a court of law and you have to identify to the judge and to the other jurors and to the parties that you are one of these disfavored outsiders. You have to make it known to the court, "Oh, by the way, I don't believe in the God you all believe in." Think how that might be prejudicial. And maybe some of you atheists have had to testify in court or sit on a jury. What do? You know what you can do is go to the clerk ahead of time and let them know, "I would like to take the secular affirmation." Because do you want to tell the judge, do you want to show the judge that your very first act in the court is an act of perjury? Swearing to tell the truth, so help you God, when you don't believe in a God? Wouldn't the judge appreciate honesty? Wouldn't that be more valuable in a court of truth-telling? The Puritans came over to this continent thinking God gave it to them. And there's that old joke that the Puritans, you know, they wanted religious freedom, right? And they loved religious freedom so much that they kept it all to themselves. They set up little colonies where they could have the insiders and the outsiders, and if you didn't believe in the Trinity or if you weren't part of this theology, well then you could be excommunicated or even killed, or you couldn't vote, or you had to move. And our country was not founded, the United States was not founded back in the early 1600s. It was a century and a half later. And I remember when I was a Christian preacher, I had this sort of fuzzy idea of American history that, oh, the Mayflower and the Constitution, like they were kind of the same thing, you know. But it was 150 years later when the founders of the United States of America, looking back and seeing the divisiveness, they saw the little theocracies that were set up. They saw the discrimination. That's the nature of that's the danger of when you mix religion and government. You get things like the witch burnings and the Taliban, and you get things like people being killed by inquisitions for heresy and for blasphemy. Our founders realized that that was not a good way to run a government. And they wisely set up the first government in history ever, the first constitution ever, to separate state and church. They separated it with a godless constitution, and then, of course, with the First Amendment. Sometimes Christians will tell me, well, Dan, where are those words in the Constitution? Where does it say separation of state and church in the Constitution? Can anybody tell me where those words appear? But where in the Constitution? Are those words there? I hear that all the time. Those words were in the Soviet Constitution, right? But those words do not appear in the U.S. Constitution, so there's no separation of state and church in the Constitution. We hear that a lot. But ask them, do they think the Constitution has the separation of powers? Yeah. Well, words aren't in the Constitution either. Does the Constitution have a Bill of Rights? Yeah. Well, those words aren't in the Constitution. What about the right to privacy? Those words aren't in the Constitution. What about interstate commerce? There's a lot of phrases that have been used to represent well-established principles. Those exact phrases actually don't appear in the founding document. As a parallel example, the word Trinity appears nowhere in the Bible. So if you're going to use that argument, Christians should stop using the word Trinity, or Christmas, or penance, or the rapture, or the second coming, or any of these other possible words that are used to talk about things to be something of a shortcut or shorthand for it. The phrase separation of state and church, as somebody pointed out correctly, it was before Thomas Jefferson, but he was the one who phrased it exactly like this when he was writing his letter to the Baptists in Connecticut about what the First Amendment meant. And he said it meant a lot of things, but among those things, the First Amendment of the Constitution erects a wall of separation between church and state. That's a wonderful phrase. That's become the representative phrase to define what the First Amendment means, the first two clauses. And the courts have used it, our society has used it, and it points to what the First Amendment is all about, a wall of separation between church and state, which is good for the country. It's good for the government and it's good for religion. When you mix religion and government, they both get dirty. You should keep them separate. When the Freedom from Religion Foundation takes lawsuits, and we have about, I think we have 8 going right now, we are most often joined by Christians and Jews and other believers who agree with us. Most believers in the United States of America, most churchgoers, support the principle of state-church separation. They realize why it's good for religion and good for the country. Because if it's religion that's going to be ruling in our government, well, whose religion? Whose religion is going to be the in religion, and who of us are going to be the out? The only way to protect true conscience on religious matters, and on any matter actually, is if the government itself backs off and stays neutral. Governmental neutrality is a keystone of First Amendment Establishment Clause and religious freedom issues. If the government isn't neutral, then somebody is losing somewhere. Think about the First Amendment. The whole Bill of Rights, of course, are amendments to the original Constitution. And the very first amendment, which actually wasn't supposed to be the first, but by historical rearrangement, it came out to be the first. So it's called the First Amendment. There are 5 freedoms in there. And we all know what they are. We all learn them in school. Religion, speech, the press, assembly, and the right to petition the government. And those 5 freedoms can generally be thought of as the freedom of conscience. We all have the freedom of conscience. Our government can't tell any of us what to think on those things or how to speak. Except notice that in the First Amendment, before you get to any of those 5 freedoms, first is a non-freedom. The first thing you get is actually a restriction, not on us people. The 5 freedoms apply to all of us as individuals. The very first clause in the very First Amendment to the Bill of Rights is actually a restriction on the government. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion. And then, of course, or abridging any of these freedoms that we have. So before we can have our individual freedoms as human beings and citizens, the government itself has to be told, back off. The government has to be told what it can't do and what it must not do. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion. And that word respecting is important because respecting means dealing with, leaning towards, having anything to do with. I often hear Christian right people, Christian nation people say that the only thing the First Amendment prohibits is the establishment of a state religion. That is not true. That's not what our founders had in mind. The founders, if they had wanted this to be a Christian nation, why didn't they say so? If America is a Christian nation, we'll produce the document that says that America is a Christian nation. They had every opportunity. In fact, some of them discussed that. Some of the founders thought, we should maybe have God. Instead of basing our Constitution, like so many governments had done before, and many after that, on the authority of some sovereign or monarch or deity or whatever, In fact, many of the Scandinavian constitutions started out based on the sovereign authority of the evangelical Lutheran Church, or whatever it was. Instead of having some authority above upon which our government hangs to get its legitimacy, the United States Constitution did this. Turned it completely upside down. And what are the first words of our Constitution? We the people. We are the authority. It's not some sovereign. It's not some king monarch. We are a proudly rebellious country. We fought a revolutionary war to kick out the monarch, the sovereign, the lord, the king, the dictator. We the people don't want anybody up there telling us how we should run our lives. I mean, think how many of these modern right-wing Christians think that we should turn it back around again this way to undo the wonderful experiment that our Constitution is. And they still want to say, well, we still want to be beneath a dictator. We still need to have some authority above and beyond us. When in fact, the success of our great country is due to the fact that we, the people, get to decide. That's a very anti-biblical concept. If you read the Bible, there's no authority in the people. There's a way that seems right to a man, but the end thereof are ways of death. Lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he will direct your path. Right? Jesus, if he existed and if he said these things, did acknowledge rendering unto Caesar the things that are Caesar. But America, even in the Declaration of Independence, which does acknowledge a creator and a providence, although Thomas Jefferson was not a Christian, and his God was the pre-Darwinian deistic God, the God of nature basically, he doesn't say anything about Jesus or Christ. In fact, Thomas Jefferson took a pair of scissors to the New Testament. Did you know that? He actually took the Bible and he said, let's look at this. And he later wrote to John Adams that he said, I went through the entire New Testament to see what good I could find. And he said, I found some good. And I found some wonderful words of Jesus. But it was like digging through a dunghill to find a diamond. Today he would use a different word from dunghill, but that's the way he phrased it back then. And he actually took a pair of scissors and he cut the Bible physically and it fell to the floor. And you can buy that Bible. You can go to the library and find the Jefferson Bible. And he cut it down to a small size and then he says, there. If that's what it means to be a Christian, then you could call me a Christian. He basically cut it into humanistic stuff. I know very few modern Christians who would think that's a good thing to do with the Word of God, cut it into pieces. But Jefferson's God was the deistic, not theistic God. Jefferson's God was not a personal God. In his practical life, you could call him a practical atheist, although he had this pre-Darwinian idea of some creator force that must have started it all. And some of the founders were like that. Some of the founders were church-going believers. Some of them did pray. Some of them did believe in miracles. And they were a varied bunch. But none of them thought the rest of us had to become carbon copies of their views. None of them thought that all Americans had to become like them. They weren't so arrogant to think that my views on religion have to be what everyone else thinks. They wanted a constitution and a government where we were all free to think or disagree. And even Jefferson wrote to his nephew and said, question with boldness even the existence of God. Sometimes you hear Christian nation people today, I hear it all the time, quoting, here's what George Washington said, and here's what Adam said, and they have all these Christian quotes from the founders. And there's no doubt historically that many of the founders had very strong biblical Christian views. And you can find a lot of these quotes. Some of them thought you could not govern without the Bible or the Ten Commandments and so on. But the important thing is that those were their personal views. Those were not official. They were not like a Jesus or a Muhammad founding some religion. We all had to think like they think. They recognized that we're free to disagree with them. If one of these right-wing Christian nation believers tries to throw some of those quotes at you, agree with them and point out that these founders also had other views as well. None of them thought women should vote. Right? If we are obligated to go back in history and adopt the personal views of the founding fathers as if they were starting some religion, well then we should take the vote away from women. They didn't want that. Right? Does anyone think that's a good idea? We've learned since then. Many or most of the founding fathers owned slaves. So should we undo the Civil War because, oops, We violated the views of the founding fathers. They didn't think we should undo slavery. And yet we've progressed beyond that. And the founding fathers realized that our country needs to progress. They made the Constitution so you could amend it. So that someone like Elizabeth Cady Stanton, who was an atheist, by the way, and her friend Susan B. Anthony, who was an agnostic Unitarian, worked for half a century fighting for women's rights so that women could vote and participate and own property and control their own children and their own income and could be full citizens in the United States. Who's to say that someone like Elizabeth Cady Stanton had no purpose in her life? I mean, look how she lived. Look what she did for us. And then we amended the Constitution so that we could correct those bad views of the founding fathers. Just because they were the founding fathers didn't mean they were godlike creatures who knew everything. They even knew that the document they were writing was going to have to be fixed and changed and amended in the future as different issues come up. Right now, some of you know this, so don't yell it out, but who knows what is the current fastest growing religion in the United States? Yeah. How did you know that? You guys are an informed bunch. That's true. If you consider non-religion to be a quote, a religion, it is currently the fastest growing one. Our country is changing. Whatever it was that happened in Europe, after how many centuries of religious fighting and divisiveness, right? The 30 Years' War, Catholics killing Protestants, Protestants killing Protestants, Catholics killing Catholics, or people, for having the right religion. And after all these years and years and centuries of all this bloodshed and divisiveness, today most Europeans are pretty thoroughly secular. In Denmark right now, it's about 4 or 5% of the Danes who consider themselves religious. The rest are just human beings. Religion is not that important to them. They have a good society. They're happy. Phil Zuckerman, in his book, Societies Without God, points out that by almost every single measure, the societies that have less religion in them are better off. With happiness, with health care, with well-being, with infant mortality, with all these different measures of how you would consider equality for women, you name it. The societies with less religion are doing much better job at having more functional societies. The societies with more religion are the ones that are dysfunctional. And it may be the cart before the horse. Maybe it's that dysfunctionality, that the economic inequities, the problems they're having, that cause people to want to buy into that cosmic lottery ticket, to hope to get out of the mess, right? But when things are going pretty well, then religion becomes less important to you. Something happened in Europe to where today most Europeans are pretty thoroughly secular and don't even think about it. In fact, Phil Zuckerman, when he was in Denmark, was surprised. He interviewed thousands of people. About 15% of the people he talked to, he asked them the question, what are your views about God? About 15% said, I don't know, I never thought of it. What's our views about God, honey? And he said, you've never thought of it? And they said, no, I never thought of it. Can you imagine that? Can you imagine someone in Memphis never having thought about the issue? Why would they? They're making a living, they're changing diapers, and they're mowing the lawn, and whatever they do, they're living their lives. They're having a good time living their life. So God is not that important. Whatever it was that happened in Europe, and maybe there's a lot of good reasons for it, it seems like it's starting to happen here on this continent. In 1990, the American Religious Identification Survey, conducted by the principal researcher was Barry Cosman, 7% of Americans picked non-religion. In 2001, 11 years later, 14.5% picked non-religion. It was a huge growth through the 90s. While everything else was shrinking. Christianity is shrinking in percentages. Judaism shrank. Judaism today is a respected minority at about 1.2% of the population. So how many Jews would there be in Memphis? What's the population in Memphis?
650,000 or something.
About 1 million? So 1.2%, what is that? 15,000. So there'd be approximately 15,000 Jews in this area, right? Non-religious today, the people who pick non-religion, are about 16%. Think of that, how many people there are in Memphis. 16%, if Memphis fits the natural average. Maybe it doesn't. But anyway, you can figure though that whatever it is, whatever the chunk is, it's a huge chunk. That 16% are not all atheists, by the way. It's really, some of those who pick non-religion are spiritual in some way or other. Whatever it means by non-religion, what's significant is the growth of it. The people picking that has grown by that much. A lot of Barry Kaufman and others say that probably the true seculars, meaning atheists and agnostics, are about 9 or 10%. So what would that be in Memphis? What would 10% of that would be? 100,000 people. 100,000 people are thoroughly without any religion in Memphis, right? Shouldn't that be reflected at the city council? I mean, shouldn't that 10% be important? Would you want to get up and offend Jews, the 15,000 Jews? Jews are an important part of the fabric of the society, and yet we non-religious are just as important, not more important, but we're just as important. We are here, our views are respectable, our lives are meaningful and moral and good, and we contribute, and we, all of these things. So why would a secular government want to exclude and make those of us who are not in the religious majority feel uncomfortable? Why would they want to do that? What's the point of having a prayer? What does it do? What's the point of doing that? We're having a meeting right now, right, with no prayer in front of it. Did it hurt anything? We have all sorts of other meetings that happen all over the place, but not having a prayer doesn't hurt a thing. I conduct some weddings sometimes as an ordained minister who now does atheist weddings, which is kind of fun. And sometimes people come up afterwards and they didn't even realize there was no religion. In fact, one of the born-again uncles of the bride came up to me and he said, "You didn't say a word about God, did you?" I said, "Well, no, but no one missed it. They're there for other reasons. They're not there because of some, how does bringing this deity into this precious private couple's moment, how does that help? What difference does that make?" So I think a lot of religious people, and the way I was when I was a minister, it just didn't dawn on me the insensitivity. It didn't dawn on me the insult that I thought I had the true religion and everybody else, well, just get over it. I mean, we have the true religion. You're welcome to come to our meetings, but, we are a Christian nation, and we'll tolerate you non-believers as if we only exist in this country because of the good graces of the good Christians who are tolerating us. How does that make us even? Something's happening in this country where we are becoming less religious, and politicians and scholars and leaders need to take account of that. And it appears to be moving. In fact, right now, this generation, the CFA people, where's the students from the CFA here? Your age group is the least religious ever. About 25% of the college to 20-somethings are thoroughly secular. And that's really huge historically. And in fact, in some parts of the country, it's 30 or 35% are thoroughly secular. It's like this generation is realizing enough is enough. We're embarrassed at our past. When I was in Dublin a couple years ago, the college students there were saying the same thing. We're embarrassed at our country. I mean, we want to catch up with the rest of Europe, and we're not our parents' generation. We're gonna do things different. Our parents and grandparents kind of mucked things up. We want a more tolerant society. In fact, they didn't care. I went to debate Richard Swinburne at University College. And I think most of the debating society there were non-believers. They didn't care that I was an atheist, but they wanted to know, are you a Protestant atheist or a Catholic atheist? In Ireland, that was very important to know. You don't have to believe in God, but I want to know which God you're not believing in. That's important. And I had to disappoint them, of course. In Ireland, I had to tell them, well, I guess I'm a Protestant atheist, because I left Protestantism. And by the way, if you want to read my story, my new book is called Godless, How an Evangelical Preacher Became One of America's Leading Atheists. And I couldn't bring, I brought like 3 or 4 with me. I couldn't really bring any to sell, but you can find them in the bookstores. So, the separation of church and state is a wonderful American experiment that's good for all of us. A secular government can only have a secular purpose. Our foundation does a lot of lawsuits and we do a lot of complaints, and prayers at city councils are a big complaint. We hear from members of ours all over. In California, there's 4 or 5 cities right now where we're writing letters, just like we wrote the letter to Memphis, that they are crossing the line. And you can see the temptation. If you're a religious mayor, a religious city council person, you can see the temptation to want to bring in your religion. Well, that temptation has to be checked. When you're doing a job as a public servant, you are serving the public in a secular sphere. We're not trying to stop people's private religion. If a mayor wants to go to church and Sunday school and speak out and do those things, well, that's private, right? No one's going to stop their speech. But if the mayor goes somewhere and speaks as mayor, representing the city, then that speech is curtailed. The First Amendment does put the brakes on official government speech. We don't ever take a lawsuit, or we never challenge a private individual freedom to speak. That would be un-American. We don't sue individuals. We sue governments. We are suing, well, we sued Bush, but now it's Obama on the National Day of Prayer. And boy, I tell you, the government has a lot of resources and a lot of attorneys to really make us jump through hoops. Annie Laurie was deposed last week by the Obama administration because of our challenge of the National Day of Prayer. And nowadays, they're concentrating more on trying to knock you out on standing rather than on the merits. If they can get you out on standing, then they don't even have to argue the case. So we have to be extremely careful in a lot of these lawsuits. We're also challenging on In God We Trust at the Visitor Center. After we took our lawsuit, they hurried up and engraved it. And so I guess that shows even greater injury. We're suing a brand new lawsuit we have now is the parsonage allowance. Do you know that ministers of the gospel, by the way, according to IRS, a rabbi is considered a minister of the gospel. Because in the 1950s, they passed this law that allowed ministers of the gospel, and of course, by extension, all clergy. And now it's being abused. It's even PE teachers at a religious school are taking this parsonage allowance. What it is if you're an ordained minister or working for a religious institution like that, you don't have to report your house payment or your rent as income. Did you know that?
Wow.
Clergy get a huge tax break just for being clergy. And not only that, not only do they not report their house payment, they can also deduct the interest on the mortgage. They're double dipping. And this thing has kind of become a huge monster because now people working in religious hospitals and all that are taking, if there's a tax break, we're going to take it, right? Well, there's this huge tax break for the clergy. We're suing on that. We don't think that's constitutional. We think it's unfair, it's un-American that there's this privileged class of people above everybody else. And the only reason it was given to them was because our country, our Congress wanted to acknowledge the help that the clergy are providing by fighting the common enemy. Some, you know, whatever that was back in the 1950s. Figure that out. So that's another one of our lawsuits. But we can't take everything to court. I mean, there's just too many cases. Often when we make a complaint, we'll write a letter. The local government will say, well, I shouldn't say often. Sometimes the local government will say, thank you, and they'll stop. Maybe it's they really realize they did something wrong, or maybe they just don't want to spend money fighting a lawsuit. Maybe that's part of it, which in these times of tightening resources, do you really want to spend money on something like that? Well, in some cases, yeah, they do. In California, there's a number of cities where we've complained about prayers at city council, and they say, well, come on, sue us, we'll fight this thing. Because it's more important to them to show their local constituents that they're standing up for God, rather than standing up for the Constitution. One good way to phrase this, and this is just my own way of doing it, and other writers and other scholars might say it a little differently, but here's one good way of phrasing it. There's a difference between the public square and the public sphere. A square is a two-dimensional, and a sphere is three-dimensional. The public square is the government. Like a square is like a two-dimensional, like a shape on a map, you know, real estate. The Capitol building, the city hall, the high school, you know, whatever. Where the government is the government. Separation from state and church should be complete in the public square. Anytime any elected official or any part of the government is speaking as the government, they should be neutral on religion. They should not advance or hinder religion. When the high school teacher comes in the room, he or she should leave their religion at the door, because they're not there to push their religion. They're there for the American experiment of all of us. Of course, when they go home, they can say what they want. They can wear whatever t-shirts they want. They can, our private speech, it's ironic because the public sphere, which is what we are here tonight, this is part of the public sphere. There are no restrictions, or very few restrictions. I suppose there might be a couple of shouting fire in the theater kind of thing, but our organization does not want to remove religion from the public sphere. We think religion and non-religion should all be out there. We should all be talking about it. We should all be discussing. We should have debates. Christians and Jews and Muslims, we should welcome them. We don't want to chase them out. We don't think we atheists have any more authority than anyone else to try to tell people what they can or can't say in the public sphere. But in the public square, the government itself, which represents all of us, it's owned by all of us, that's why we call it the public, that's where separation of state and church must be absolute. Because if it isn't, then it compromises somebody else's position within society. So, like I said before, we're not rushing into churches and trying to drag people out of their pews as if we had some kind of authority as atheists. We don't. We're just people like everyone else. When was the last time an atheist knocked on your front door? Trying to convince you. And what would they hand you? A blank sheet of paper. Most of us are live and let live. Many of us think the world would be better off with less religion, and I'm convinced of that, but we're not going to try to use the force of government or any kind of force. The only force we should use is the force of persuasion and reason and argument. And to their credit, most Christians agree with that. I think most Christians don't think you should use the force of any power or coercion, that people should voluntarily come to Jesus like I used to preach. Most Muslims say the same thing. There's no coercion in Islam here. And that, in fact, most Muslim governments have been very tolerant of those who are not Muslim. And you should only want someone in your religion who wants to be, not because of some force or undue endorsement. So in the public sphere, we put up our billboards out in public, and we put up our bus signs. In fact, we have a bus sign right now in Seattle, Washington, on 100 buses. It's a cartoon of Santa Claus with the holly and all that, saying, "Yes, Virginia, there is no God." And it's been vandalized. People are cutting off the word "no." People are painting it over. And we've complained to the bus company, and they say, well, they can't control. I think it's an inside job, because a whole bunch of them are being vandalized. When was the last time a Christian billboard was vandalized? Most of us, atheists and agnostics, we might disagree with it, but we're happy to see free speech, because if your speech isn't free, then neither is mine, right? So we don't care about that in the public sphere. I mean, we want our place at the table, too. I was invited to Canada in October to sit at the World Religions Conference as there were 7 religions and me, right? A non-religion. And we didn't want to dominate it. We want to be at the table as well. But in the public square, in the government itself, when the government speaks and acts as government, we think the Constitution and the courts on our side generally prohibit members of the government from abusing their authority, speaking out to promote or to hinder anyone's religious point of view. And that's why we take the actions that we take. I think this is a good time to do questions. What do you think? Jeannie, do you want to pick them, or should I? Oh, there's microphones here. Okay. If you do have questions, there's a mic on that side, and there's a mic on this side.
Yeah, hi. I'm from Memphis. I've noticed the prayer at the city council. And the first time I noticed it, I was surprised. I thought that was old hat. And I guess what I want to ask, well, I have an experience. I'm Jewish, or was Jewish, and in the 2nd grade we had to read the Bible. And I'd never read the Bible. And I just felt funny. which is similar to what people feel when they go down to the city council and they're doing this. I actually thought that it was against the law, and that, I guess my question is, do we need to sue to undo it, or could we just ask that the law be abided by and that they cease?
Yeah, well, that's what we have done. Some people here in Memphis, like you, saw what was happening, and you can see how some people don't want to be identified locally. They don't want to say, I'm the person complaining about prayers. So that's why groups like ours can be important, because we can speak as a group and then we can protect anonymity. So the persons who did complain to us asked us to write a letter, and we did that. We asked the city to stop. It looks like they're not going to. It looks like they think their prayer is more important than the Constitution. And why should we have to bully a city to obey the law? Why wouldn't a city want to be a good example? It's not harming anyone's religious freedom by keeping the city government neutral. It's not an attack against religion. When I was a right-wing preacher, I used to think, and even Jesus had this problem, that there was no middle ground. I had trouble distinguishing between neutrality and hostility. If we made the city council neutral, to me that was a hostile act. It was like, oh, you're attacking religion. But of course you're not attacking religion. You're stopping the religionists from attacking everyone else. You're just keeping it neutral. And if Jesus said what he said, he that is not with me is against me. Which isn't true, obviously. He couldn't see that you can have neutrality. That was sort of the mentality of like a small-town dictator who thinks everybody's going to think like me, or else, it's that kind of an idea. And I think there's a territorialism with religion, and a lot of people in cities feel like, well, if everybody doesn't think like me, then there's something wrong with my views. Real maturity allows for all points of view. But so it would be nice, for a city to be shown that what you're doing is unconstitutional. Here's the cases. You should stop doing that. At least keep them non-sectarian. If you're going to do prayers, at least have them be don't end in Jesus' name, just have it a generic kind of maybe deistic kind of thing, which the courts have kind of smiled on a little bit, but even then it still excludes those of us who are not believers, right?
Just to follow, I do think that they rotated around, if I'm not mistaken.
He thinks they've rotated around.
And I do think they sometimes have a rabbi, and they sometimes have and that's a little more okay.
Yeah.
Or even an open asylum. But it's a slippery slope.
Yeah, so why do it at all, But what he says is he's noticing, and is that pretty recent? Do you think they're starting to move it around more because of the complaint? Starting to involve a broader cross-section of people?
No, I don't think so. I don't know.
Oh, okay. But there was a Supreme Court case, Marsh versus Chambers, which allowed for legislative prayer on very narrow, very specific grounds. And that was between the members themselves. It wasn't directed at the public at large, and is not sectarian. So in that Marsh, Nebraska case, if the legislators, if the members all get together and agree, well, let's have our own prayer, well then who's going to stop that? That's kind of private, isn't it? They're talking to themselves. But if they do it at the public meeting where everybody's present and the prayers are directed at the people, and especially if they're sectarian, well, that's really crossing the line. So thanks for pointing out how you felt about that. Is somebody on?
All of those religious beliefs that I have had. And so I know you have a limited time here, but I just wondered what was the key factors that sort of changed you personally?
Yeah, my own personal story.
Just briefly.
Well, it's in the book. The book's called Godless. Well, it's too much to tell in a short time, but basically I changed my mind. I was on Oprah Winfrey's show. In fact, the very first time I spoke publicly about atheism, and the very first time I spoke before a hostile audience, was on her show in Chicago. And she asked me that, what happened? And I said, I changed my mind. I learned that what I was preaching, that what I used to love, I learned that it's false. And I hated to learn that. Just like Christians would be glad to hear a Muslim in Baghdad say, oh, I learned that my Islam is false. You'd be saying, yes, you've risen above it. Well, that's what happened with me. I rose above Christianity. I realized that the Bible's not reliable. The Bible is anachronistic, it's unhistorical, it's contradictory, it's unscientific. There's no good evidences for God or arguments for God. There's no need for God. There's no agreement among believers. It just doesn't make sense. In spite of the fact that most Christians are good people, the book that they think they're basing their life on is they built it on the sand and they don't know it. That Bible is not reliable. And I loved it, but I tell the story in the book of how I gradually, took 4 or 5 years, moved across that spectrum. I dumped out all the bath water and I found out there's no baby there. You know, so there's more to say, and I'm sorry that's so brief, but on this side here.
Thank you for coming. My understanding is there's approximately or exactly 8 states in the Union that forbid atheists from holding public office. And I'm wondering how in the world those laws have survived through today.
Yes, some of these laws are still in the books, but somebody has to take action to remove them, right, to nullify them. And who's going to do that? Most of those laws are just, they have no teeth and they're not enforced. Herb Silverman in South Carolina saw that there was that law that you couldn't become a notary public. It wasn't a notary public. You couldn't run for office. That's right. It was Roy Torcaso with notary public. You couldn't run for public office if you didn't believe in God. So he ran for governor in South Carolina. He didn't want to be governor. He just ran for governor to test this law, to see if he could get on the ballot and all of that. And a reporter asked him, what if you did get elected governor? What's the first thing you would do? And he said, demand a recount. But it turned out not to be a problem, but sometimes the way to test these laws is to test the laws. But it does show, though, the discrimination, that the idea that, in fact, in most courts, that so help you God, the religious oath, if you can swear in the Bible, it's assumed that you are honest, right? But the secular affirmation in most of these courts have all this extra verbiage, like I affirm to tell the truth under the penalties of perjuries of the law, all this blah blah, as if you're an atheist, well, you have to be reminded that it's wrong to tell a lie, right? But if you're a believer, it's just assumed that you're a good person. There's that prejudice built into a lot of our laws. But what does it in Tennessee? Can an atheist run for... No? If you participated in a duel, or if you are an atheist. Oh, okay. Well, you know what I think? I think that's where Unitarianism makes great cover. You know, if you can say I go to church, right? Even if you're an atheist, you can still run. Isn't it funny that we still think people can be judged by their religion? How people should be judged by their actions, not their religion. How many religious people are crooks? You know, I mean, think about it. Just because you're religious, that means you're somehow more honorable.
That's a trick question.
Here's the question.
Mr. Barker, thank you for coming. I listen to Free Thought Radio every week and have been for a while. Not for a long time, but their own podcast, that's handy. That was just a preface. My question is, it's first week of December, so it's kind of the unofficial start of the war on Christmas. A secular starting a war there. And I know you had a part in, was it in Olympia, Washington, with the display last year? My question is really about the goal of doing that. Was it, well, I wrote it down so I wouldn't remember. Is it, are you hoping to get kind of selectively denied and then be able to pursue it in court? Or are you hoping to not be, to be let in with something like the display you had? You can remind everybody what it was. But the display you had in so that there's pressure on the government from, let's say a Christian Nation type group say that can't be in there. So that the Washington, I think, did this year says nothing's going to be in the Capitol. Or is it kind of to turn the spotlight on those groups that would say put up a manger and would advocate so strongly for that to kind of let them know how it feels from the other side? So what's your, maybe not goal, but preferred outcome for something like that?
Oh, thanks for listening to the show. Free Thought Radio is on Air America. It's a weekly show, and I think we're on our about 190th show now.
It's also on podcast.
And it's on podcast, yeah. And there's more podcast listeners than actual broadcast listeners, which is interesting.
That's true of a lot of shows.
Because you can listen in your car whenever you want to. And this week's show, we talked with Robert Price, the scholar, about the war on Christmas. Of course, we don't call it a war. Bill O'Reilly calls it a war. We like to say we're lobbing a few snowballs is what we're doing. Last year, 2 years ago, a Christian wanted to put a nativity scene in the Washington Capitol in Olympia, and was turned down, and so they went to court to sue, and the state said, well, let's not fight this, let's let them put a nativity scene inside the Capitol building, which had never been used for that before. So some of our members in the state said, wait a minute, how can they have a religious symbol there? Not everybody thinks the nativity scene is this nice, warm, fuzzy, some of us see it as an insult, right? That if we don't bow down and like slaves before this baby who grows up to be the dictator of the universe. What an insult to human nature that is. We're all sinners, right? And some of us are humanists and above that kind of thinking. But we think if Christians want to do that, they should do that in their own churches and in their front lawns. It's a free country. But they shouldn't be using the seat of government for all of us. So we asked for a permit to put our winter solstice sign in the Capitol. And the state of Washington said, okay. If they're going to allow one, they can't disallow any. Our sign said, at this season of the winter solstice, may reason prevail. There's no gods, no devils, no heaven, no hell. There's only our natural world. Religion is myth and superstition that hardens hearts and enslaves minds. We wanted that hard edge at the end of it to make a point. If it was just a nicey thing, then the point wouldn't be made. Some of our members thought it was a bit too strong, and some didn't think it was strong enough. You can't tell freethinkers what to think. But in any event, we wanted to make the point that if you're going to have religion, then you should have all other points of view. And so I went to put that thing up, and I thought maybe a dozen of our friends would be there, and we had a little unveiling ceremony. Well, the Capitol picked it right next to the nativity scene, right, to put it there. So when I came around the corner, I saw some of our friends there, and then there were like 3 TV cameras and newspapers, and it was like a big deal. The atheists are attacking Christmas, and so it was on the evening news with me reading that thing. And then Bill O'Reilly, he's in Seattle, he made a big deal of it. For 3 nights in a row, he went after us. And he said, call up the governor and tell him to take that atheist side. This is the Christmas holiday. Jesus was a historical person. They have no right to insult our religion by doing that. Our point, as you were asking, was to get all of it removed. We don't think our sign belongs there either. We don't think pro or anti-religion should be at the seat of a secular government. And it was wonderful. We got all... We're going to put a plaque on our building to Bill O'Reilly, because we got all these people calling and joining our group. People would call and say, anybody that he hates, I'm joining your group. And then a couple nights later, the Colbert Show ran it. You might have seen. So I wasn't actually on the show, but you could see me reading the sign. And he made the word, he made this funny thing about it. So then, as you know, dozens of other groups asked for a permit. And it caused this huge circus of all these big, the fool hath said in his heart, there's no God. And suddenly they got flooded with everybody, and it became like this big war. There was a big rally on Sunday outside with bullhorns and people going to hell and Jesus, and they're attacking Christmas, they're attacking our Savior. And they had to put a stop to it just before Fred Phelps got his thing up there, condemning gays to hell. And unfortunately, also before the Flying Spaghetti Monster and the Festivus Bowl, they were going to have one there too. So they put a moratorium on it. And this year they decided not to have any, which we call a victory. On this side? Yeah.
Today, I heard on the radio that 420 on the radio today, I heard that $420 billion are collected annually from churches. And I want to know, why don't they have to pay taxes? And why isn't that money accounted for? Why shouldn't, if you're supposed to pay 10%, how come the 10% doesn't go back out to the community?
Yes.
Well, religion is a business. They have to run it as a business. And if they're going to be a recognized church and tax exempt by the IRS, they have to at least be some kind of a business. And of course, they have income and expenses. And But you're right about the accountability. Our organization, the Freedom from Religion Foundation, we're a 501c3 nonprofit group. So we don't pay taxes either. But unlike churches and religious organizations, we have to be accountable. We have to file this cumbersome 990 form that churches don't have to file. We have to show where every penny came from and where every penny went. You can go online and you can see my salary. We're accountable to the public. We have to be, right? You can see where everything we've done, but churches don't. Churches don't have to say how much it came in or where it came from or what they're spending it on. It's assumed that if it's a religion, it's a good thing and the government backs off. And so there's a huge difference there, and you can see the potential for abuse. You can see what happens when there's no oversight. And now, since George Bush set up the faith-based initiative, a lot of these religious groups are getting public money to do not just social work, because a lot of religious groups are doing good social work. It's mostly the liberal ones that are doing it most of the time. But now, after Bush, you could get the money without, and you could discriminate. You discriminate in your hiring and in what you do. And I think I agree with you that where public money goes, public accountability should follow. There's nothing in the Constitution about giving churches a tax break. There's nothing there. There's no reason why that has to be. When I was a minister, I used to think, well, it's because we churches are doing such a wonderful moral job in the community. We're actually resulting in so much less crime that the government doesn't have to hire as many police officers because of all the good that we are doing. Of course, the prisons are packed with believers, right? So what you raise is an interesting issue, but it's going to be a long time before we could figure out a way to challenge that. There was a challenge in Colorado about 10 years ago. John Patrick Michael Murphy, you can tell what country he came from, who, by the way, said he became an atheist as a young boy when the priest opened his robe and came at him. And he said, no way am I going to go back to that church. But he got it on the ballot in Colorado to remove tax exemption from churches and religious organizations. And he campaigned for a whole year and got about 12% of the vote, which actually is kind of good. The Catholic Church poured millions of dollars into fighting that thing. So we can complain about it, but there's right now, in the next 10, 20, 50 years, there's very little chance that we're going to get that. At least we're going after that parsonage allowance to try to challenge at least that break. The clergy think they are somehow a special class. In fact, you know what happens? Some of the clergy are arranging it so that the church pays their entire salary as a housing allowance. They don't have to report it. Well, the IRS finally clapped down on that and said you at least have to limit it to fair market value. So thanks.
What is a non-religious church called? Is it just called that?
A non-religious church?
Or a yeah.
There are some like that. There are some churches that are non-religious, but they're considered religions by the IRS. Ethical culture. There's a group called Society of Humanistic Jews. They're all atheists and agnostics, and yet they still do Passover, which means to them, pass the food over. So there are some non-religious churches, but it seems kind of weird because how can a non-religion be a religion? But you might want to be for tax reasons. Yeah.
Seeing as we're in the Bible Belt, there's a lot of teachers that like to assume that people are Christians as they are. I've had a lot of experiences with teachers that like to impose, maybe a strong word, but that actually would be a correct word with some of the teachers. What are the things that teachers do that are especially egregious, and what are the things that I'm talking about by law and the Constitution? What are the things that they do that the courts overlook, and what are the things that if I see a teacher doing that I can really get them in trouble for?
Yeah.
Because some of the teachers, I believe I've already gotten one fired because she was actually imposing her religion on our class. I'm just wondering what are the things that teachers can do that are especially egregious, basically.
If she was imposing religion in the class, then she was an inept teacher and should have been fired. She was breaking. Huh?
She was not a good teacher.
But in any event, that's violating the terms of the employment. It is true, however, that you hear reverse stories once in a while. 2 or 3 times a year you might hear a story about some teacher denying a Christian student to make a Valentine card to Jesus, right? You hear about that. Well, the religious right takes those stories and they say, look, Christians are being persecuted. But for every one of those that you can find, there are thousands and thousands of religious teachers going too far the other way. And often the principal or the district looking the other way, depending on what community you're in. We won a lawsuit here in Tennessee in 2004 in Dayton, Tennessee, and you all know where that is. The William Jennings Bryan College was sending students, not even education students, but sending students into the 5th grade classroom to teach the Bible for 1 hour a week. And a very brave family complained. In fact, they stayed anonymous. They complained about it. And the teachers were leaving the room. There was no curriculum. There was no actual formal agreement in the school board. But once a week they were going in, and their kids were coming home singing "Jesus Loves Me" and hearing how bad evolution is. I mean, that's what's going on. We sued, and the entire school board voted 100% to continue it. So did the entire county. And we won at the court level in Chattanooga, and then they appealed, and we won again at that level. So those are a gross violation, and the teachers would just leave the room. Here's these religious students from this evangelical or born-again college coming into the classroom. The teacher would just go out of the room for that whole hour, which really seems dangerous, seems scary. There was a kid in Wisconsin who was denied his certificate because he told the teacher he doesn't believe in God, and other kids picked on him. There was the McCollum case in the 40s where they brought religious instruction into the schools, and the non-religious kids had to sit out in the hall, which then their kids picked fun at them. In the school, at that level, as soon as you introduce this religious divisiveness, well, there's always going to be that. Yeah, the kids are going to always do that, But if the school appears to be on one side, if the school itself, if the teacher or the school, then look what that does to the insiders and the outsiders. A big problem we hear about every year is high school choir directors in December. And not only doing 100% Christmas carols, but holding it in a church. We wouldn't complain if there was 1 or 2 Christmas songs in a holiday concert, because if there was 1 or 2 Christmas songs, fine, you can't accuse the school of having a Christian agenda, as long as there might be a Jewish song in a secular winter solstice. If there was, but if you can see that the choir director has this agenda that's pro-Christian, well, then that's crossing the line. So watch for things like that. And Jewish kids that have to go sing at a Baptist church and it's part of their grade, it's part of their thing, and can they opt out, or do they want to opt out? There's that problem that happens a lot too. Thanks. Over here.
I thought I'd share a quote by Woody Allen that Garrison Keillor mentioned last week. He said, "To you I'm an atheist, to God I'm the loyal opposition." And something that I told some people a couple of years ago when I was battling cancer, when they asked if they could pray for me, I said, "Yeah, but don't mention my name, I'm an atheist." Anyway, those figures that you gave for Jews in Memphis or any place and atheists may be a little misleading, because there are a lot of Jewish atheists like me. And like you mentioned, the Society for Humanistic Judaism, the late Rabbi Wein, and this whole Reconstructionist stuff, I know, it's just,
So there's actually less Jews than...
I'm sorry?
There's less Jews than the numbers say.
Well, if you interviewed them, they might say they're atheists, but they still might. I don't know how it would work out.
Oh, I see. So there's actually maybe a little more atheists than we would think, because...
Or maybe more Jews than you would think, because this guy here, he said he was Jewish. According to the rabbis, he's probably still Jewish, but...
Yeah.
I'm just saying, there are a lot of Jewish atheists, a lot of secular Jews.
Well, similarly, what does it mean with me and my love and respect for my American Indian heritage? It's important. And I love those songs that Granddad used to sing, going to powwows, and that doesn't mean that it's a religious view, but it's an ethnic thing.
Exactly. Yeah.
And with a lot of Jews, it's the same thing. They don't have to believe all that stuff because it's the mistakes of their ancestors, but it's still meaningful to them, because those are the songs that Grandma sang, and
tradition.
Yeah, tradition. Woody Allen also said, I don't believe in life after death, but just in case I'm taking a change of underwear.
He also said something about immortality. He didn't want it through his writing. He just wanted immortality. He wanted to live forever. Or something.
Yeah, I want to attain immortality by not dying.
Hi, Mr. Parker. Thank you for your time. I'm curious to hear your thoughts on like the chaplain corps in the military. I don't hear a lot about that, but how embedded religion is in the United States military and how you could possibly challenge that.
Yeah, it's really bad. You know, Mikey Weinstein, his organization, he's really going at it full guns. Evangelical Christian right in the military is viewing the military as a mission field. And not only a mission field in the military, but wherever they are, you know, getting Bibles out. And the chaplaincy, maybe a minimal argument can be made for chaplains as an accommodation for those people who need or want it. You're taking people away from their home, away from their community, away from their churches, into some strange area where there's, you know, some wilderness somewhere. And, you know, you might provide entertainment and movies and pool tables and refreshments, and you might provide also some religious services for people who want them, right? As a passive accommodation. But what usually is happening far too often is that it crosses from passive into a proactive thing. A lot of the chaplains in the ministry view themselves as proactively trying to go after and convert, especially the evangelicals, and that's crossing the line. And many of the Veterans Administration hospitals make you fill out a spiritual inventory before you can get any service. One of our members in Wisconsin was going in just for glasses and had to fill out the spiritual inventory, and actually you can be considered spiritually unfit in a veterans hospital. Not all of them do this, by the way, but the National Veterans Hospital are doing that. And so if you turn out how often do you pray, how often do you read your holy book, how often do you go to church, they say, oh, this person is spiritually deficient and we need to give them some counseling to bring them up. I mean, that stuff's going on all the time. So to be fair, let's admit that maybe accommodation, it's like the chaplains in the Senate and the chaplains in the legislature, for the members themselves, if they feel a need for their own spiritual, and they're away from home. But I tell you, Colorado Springs is not a wilderness. I mean, there's churches everywhere there. Why do they need that big chapel there? By the way, I performed an atheist wedding at that Protestant chapel in Colorado Springs once, which was really fun. And since I'm an ordained minister, the actual chaplain at the base there just went ahead and approved me to do it, not knowing that I'm an atheist doing an atheist wedding. It was pretty cool. They removed all the religious decorations except that big aluminum cross that looks like a sword that's hanging down. You know, they couldn't get rid of that. But so it's a serious problem, and we need to complain. And there are atheists and agnostics and believers in the military who support state-church separation who are uncomfortable about this whole God and war thing. What is it with war and God? You know, that's when we put God on our money, is when we're during war times.
You can have that combination with civilians, but they're high-ranking officers that get paid to be a Christian minister, Christian chaplain, or a Jewish chaplain.
Yeah, those chaplains are being paid.
And
Yeah.
High-ranking officers, which presents in my experience, I spent 12 years, pressure on lower-ranking, oftentimes pressure on lower-ranking enlisted people. These guys have military authority as well as spiritual authority.
Yeah, they have all that, and that's a paid job as well. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Gil Carter, and I have a question and a challenge for you. My question is, what is the basis of your contention with our city council here? And the reason why I ask that is because in respect to the First Amendment, you spoke of the ideals of Thomas Jefferson and other founding fathers, but specifically Thomas Jefferson, even though, as all of us know, did not hold to some of those tenets himself, namely owning slaves. And given the fact that prayer in and of itself is a form of speech, and if I'm following you correctly, again, in respect to the First Amendment, you are emphasizing the freedoms that that amendment affords to speech. So if prayer essentially is speech, how can your contention be against the city council for prayers of the Judeo-Christian nature? You know, either or.
Yeah, it's very simple. There's a difference between private individual speech, which we all have that freedom, and governmental speech. When the government as government is speaking, the government is curtailed by the First Amendment. You and I as individuals, you know, if President Obama wants to get up and talk about Jesus and God, even as president, that's his private views that we know. But if he's calling all the rest of us then, if he's speaking as president then, and when Chief Justice Roberts swore him in and he inserted those words, he tampered with the Constitution and he inserted those words, "So help me God." He's overstepping his authority. Because when you're acting as government, as a high school teacher, as a mayor, when you're doing your job as government, then your speech has to be neutral. So think in your own mind, are we listening to a private person here just giving us their private views, or are we actually seeing governmental speech? If there's a permanent nativity scene on City Hall that's owned by the government, well, that's governmental speech. If it's a nativity scene owned by a private group in an area that might be considered a public forum, like in a park, that we all know that's not the government. We all know that that's the First Baptist Church putting up that nativity scene for a month. That's different. Because if you can see that distinction between your private freedoms and the government itself speaking, then you can see what's wrong with the prayers at Memphis, because that's an official meeting happening for official governmental business, and when the government conducts and invites in especially clergy to sanction their meetings with this governmental function, and the clergy in that case are fulfilling a kind of governmental role by participating with the government, that's crossing the line. If they just want to privately pray in the back, they can do that. There's nobody telling them they can't pray. If they want to go in their office for a minute and, you know, pray to Jesus or Muhammad or Allah or whatever, that's fine. But during the actual governmental functioning, during that meeting itself, it crosses the line between private free speech and governmental speech. That's why we complain, and that's why it's wrong.
Okay. Well, my challenge to you specifically is to reevaluate your definitions of religion versus spirituality, because I've heard you say a great deal about religion in the context of how it fits in with public policy and state affairs, but with you being a former minister yourself, you should know that true Christianity promotes true altruism, and public officials are called to be altruistic. So aside from religious sideshows and fanfare, true Christianity does promote altruism, and I contend that that should be kept, especially amongst our governmental officials. So I do challenge you to look at religion versus true spirituality.
Thank you. I will comment that altruism is not spiritual. Altruism is a physical act in a natural world with real consequences that either contribute to harm or lack of harm. Altruism is a humanistic concept. It's not a spiritual concept. And it's to the credit of most religions that they have borrowed humanism and brought it into their faith. And it's to the credit of most Christians that they know how to be humanistic, but that has nothing to do with spirituality. The spiritual realm is a debatable thing. So, in fact, true Christianity is not totally altruistic. There's a lot in there, you know, when Jesus even talked about owning and beating slaves, for example. Jesus showed how compassionate he was by telling believers that there are some slaves that you should not beat as hard as others because they didn't know any better, right? He never once spoke out against it. Why didn't he? Why didn't this great leader supposedly say there's something wrong with slavery? He incorporated it into all of his parables as if it were the most natural order. There is some good in Christianity, but I don't think you're right to link spirituality with altruism. Altruism is a natural, mainly instinctively evolved thing that we all have. When somebody commits a horrible deed, a horrible crime, the first thing we say is, what an inhuman thing to do. We assume that basic human nature is empathetic and altruistic, and the headlines are headlines because they are horrible. They are people that are way off here on the sick end of the bell curve who are committing these horrible deeds. So spirituality is irrelevant to a secular government doing true altruism in the real world.
But how can you say it's irrelevant when it goes against the grain, the complete framework of human nature? Humans, by nature, are inward, not outward. So to promote an altruistic way of doing things, an altruistic mindset, it forces one to think of others first as opposed to thinking of one's needs first.
Did you hear his question? Okay. what he said, that humans by nature are inward and not altruistic, that itself is a religious teaching. That is not a scientific teaching. Science is showing us that by nature human beings are altruistic. By nature we are empathetic. By nature we inherit it. We are social creatures and social animals, and we don't have original. We're not evil people that are totally selfish. In fact, most human beings by nature are giving, sharing, positive, good, altruistic. It's religious teachings who pervert that and say that there's something wrong with us.
I didn't mean to cut you off, but what you just said is the converse. You just talked about what society shows through the news and various forms of media, how obviously altruism is not part of the human framework. It's not a part of human nature. And in order to promote altruism, it has to go past what is innately, what's innate.
I know I used to preach that sermon, and so I know what you mean, but that is a religious concept. That is not a natural human scientific concept. The headlines are headlines because they're headlines. We don't live our lives in the headlines. Those headlines are there because of how inhuman they are, how unrepresentative they are, how shocking they are. The natural lives that we all live as human beings are not original sin. They are not bad. They are not totally selfish. By nature, most of us here are good, giving. And that's one of the problems I had with Christianity, was its total perversion of what human nature is really like, that we're all sinners that need to bow down before this. So in any event, in our country, the United States of America, even if that were true, it's irrelevant. In our country, we have secular governments. And if people want to be privately motivated by their religious views, fine. No one's stopping that. But when our government acts as government, it should act as real altruistic human beings, natural human animals that we are. And I would hope that we would stop feeling this dependence on some supernatural spook, as if we needed an excuse to be good people. You have a question down here? Oh, well, you're next.
Yeah, okay. My name's Tim Boyer. Thank you very much for coming. I've enjoyed this just by virtue of full disclosure. I agree with that young man who's walking out. I am in support of what he said. I sort of took a different path than you. I was a unbelieving, very selfish person that is now a believing Christian. And I consider myself a free-thinking Christian as well. It might be a paradox in terms, or you might think it to be that, but I see myself as that. I have studied not only Christianity. I'm not a pastor. I'm a lay teacher at a local church, and so I've studied all sorts of humanistic studies as well as religion, and I have to admit, for being a free thinker, or a purported free thinker, I do get offended when you make fun of my God. You can say you don't believe in him, and that's fine, but to poke active fun at him, I just see that as being a problem. A couple of points and then one question. The separation of church and state that you mentioned. My parents are from Danbury, Connecticut. The letter that was written that has those words were written to the Danbury Baptist Association because they were afraid that the government was going to establish a church. And I know you know that and understand that. And Thomas Jefferson wanted to assure them that he did not plan on limiting that, and in fact closed his letter to the Danbury Baptist Convention saying, "I reciprocate your kind prayers for the protection and blessing of the common Father and Creator of man, and tender you for yourselves and your religious association assurances of my high respect and esteem." The thought that the founding fathers were irreligious. Yes, some were deists. Some were, Franklin, I'll give you that. Franklin, Jefferson, they were probably more deists. 27 of the founding fathers were ordained Christian pastors. Do you know where Thomas Jefferson and many of his folks went to church when he was in the government? Do you know where their church was? Their church was in the U.S. Capitol building for many, many years. You can look that up, Google that when you get home. But it was at the U.S. Capitol that a church, and they rotated pastors. It wasn't just a Baptist or a Lutheran or a Methodist. There were lots of different folks. So I'm glad to be here because I like people who are free thinkers. But free thinking involves studying and misquoting, saying that Jesus said that it's okay to beat these guys and he was slick with slavery. That is wrong. In fact, the biblical version of slavery, one second guys, the biblical version of the biblical version of slavery, what happened? When were they released? Do you know?
And
come again? 7 times 7 plus 1. 50 years. Every 50 years, the year of Jubilee, if you were sold into slavery, you were to be set free. It was indentured servitude. Hey. Okay, no, okay, hey, one sec. Go read what the year of Jubilee is. Okay, you can find it. We don't have enough time for that. I've taken too much. One question though. You admitted, Mr. Barker, that what again did you say was the fastest growing religion? What? Non-religion. Okay. How then can you say to the Memphis City Council that they must implement your form of religion? No, hold it, time out. He said the words. He said that non-religion was a religion. That humanism is what he said. No, hey. He said humanism is a religion.
I understand the question.
So why are you imposing humanism on the city council or anyone else?
Well, thank you. Thank you for the comments in that. I did put that word religion in quotes, and I very specifically said, how can non-religion be a religion? But in the American Religious Identification Survey, when people were asked to pick their religion, that percentage of people picked none, right? It's not that that's a religion. And as I pointed out, where Jesus misunderstood the concept of neutrality, a lot of modern Christians also misunderstand that by thinking that by a government being neutral, somehow that's hostile. Well, we are not asking for Memphis to get up and say, let's all quote, God is dead and Jesus is a myth. We're not asking for a proactive atheistic statement to be made by the Memphis, by any city council. We're simply asking them to honor our Constitution and be neutral, not to advance or hinder. And if you view that as a hostile religion, then it shows the mindset that religious people have. They view everything in this binary sense, that I have a religion and everyone else has an anti-religion to me. And I support free speech and freedom of opinion. And if you want to call yourself a freethinker, please do, but be careful. If you look up the word freethinker, I encourage you to look in the dictionary. The word freethinker as a single word with no space between it has been reserved by the dictionaries as far back as 1717. Freethinkers are people who opt out of established religion. They are the atheists, the agnostics, the skeptics. So you might want to call yourself a free space thinker. Fine. But you might confuse people to think that you're calling yourself a free thinker or a free thought in that historical sense, and which could be ambiguous. People might think you're saying you're an atheist or an agnostic. The dictionary has reserved that word for the skeptics in religion. And you know the Bible very well. Paul said that every Christian should bring into captivity every thought unto the obedience of Christ. To be a Christian, you must not lean on your own understanding. Captivity is the word Paul used. And in my mind, captivity of thought to obedience is not free thought. It's not liberty. It's obedience to a dictator. And if I find parts of your Bible to be ridiculous, I will say so in a free society. That the actions of the God of the Bible... And if that offends you, that shows us how thick your skin is. I mean, we all are offended by someone else's comments. And I hope you're not suggesting that we who are critical of every religion must censure ourselves in the public sphere from calling a spade, from saying that this God you believe in is somehow worthy of respect just because he says so, or because some people with a collar turned around backwards say so. The God you believe in is beneath my respect as a human being. He's ridiculous. And if you want to believe that, fine. You're in a free society, and I bet you're a good man. I bet you're a wonderful, compassionate, moral person in spite of your religion. In spite of Jesus. You're smarter than him. You're
again,
kinder than him.
I think mocking me is,
It's not mocking you.
It is, sir. It is. But just a point.
But you already asked your question. I'm sorry. There's other people waiting in line here.
Yeah,
So
just one thought. You said that Jesus, the issue. Yeah, well, one second, sir. If you want to come talk, you can. The point is, if you were to go and read the moral code that Jesus put down, and you have, because you studied it, you can find yourself an unflawed moral code in that. Thank you for your time and your
Thank you. I appreciate your comments, really, because I used to feel that way, and I know exactly how he feels. But when you look at the moral code of Jesus, it is inferior. The moral teachings of Jesus, any one of us could have come up with a better system. And of course, the Bible tells us that we are fools. The Bible says the fool is set in his heart. So, I take that in a lighthearted way. I don't take it so personally when the Bible tells me I'm a fool. The Bible's just wrong. And people who use the Bible as the basis for their moral authority don't have an inner moral compass of their own. So, we have a question over here. Yeah.
Thank you. Just a couple of statements. It's probably inherently obvious to most people, but altruism is a survival requirement. Evolution would require altruism. We don't survive by yourself. Secondly, just to point out the base chapel here at Millington, the Navy base, is all over the walls. Crosses, pictures of Jesus everywhere. There's no menorahs. There's no Buddhas. There's no nothing. It's Christian.
Yeah.
So I don't go to the chapel unless I have to.
Smart man.
And the third point I'd like to say is that you were talking about the faith-based support that President Bush put into place.
Yeah.
And President Obama is supporting. Just like to point out that those government funds that are going to churches, a lot of those funds probably also go to the Mormon Church, which probably doesn't need it, but can get it. And the Mormon Church, by the way, is a political behemoth, doing things like supporting Proposition 8 in California. So there's the danger in tax-free support of religion. I could think of about 5 more things to say, but thanks.
A wonderful book that I just read by Franz de Waal called The Age of Empathy, showing that not only human primates, but many other species as well, are sacrificial, they are compassionate, they have emotions, they give, they hold back, they stop and they lick each other's wounds, they will hug each other. We are not the only species that have this natural inbred empathy. Elephants, whales, the cetaceans, dolphins, apes, and other species, even cross species. So empathy and altruism are a natural part of who we are evolved. The myth of original sin, I think, has done so much damage, especially to children, thinking they might die and go to hell. What a horrible doctrine. Any religion that scares a kid is not a good religion. This whole idea that we're original sinners that have to be damned. And that was part of my debate with the Muslims last week. Because the Muslim hell, I think, is worse than the Christian hell. Here's a question.
Well, obviously you can put Paul, thank you for him and Augustine for the original sin.
Yeah.
But besides that, what would you say to counteract some of these religious leaders? I mean, I've seen a YouTube ad for it, like Dear God, blah, blah. And I know Kirk Cameron and Ray
God.
and a few other leaders
Which one?
openly brag about how schools don't have prayer in them. how would you counteract that idea where they're directly lying about that? Because as a student, you can pray at any time, or you should have that right. But the teacher should not have the right to openly lead a prayer, or a principal, superintendent, coach, or somebody that's working there, because that seems more like endorsing.
It's like that old joke, as long as there are math tests, there will be prayer in school. And nobody opposes that. And if they think a teacher has the right to impose their religion, well, what could an atheist teacher do the same thing? Could an atheist teacher get up in class and say, okay, kids, before we take our test, let's all say that God is a delusion, right? Okay, now take your test, right? Obviously, you would hear from some parents, wouldn't you, if that were to happen? So the only approach is to be neutral, to be totally neutral. Unless you're holding a banana in your hand. Then how do you explain that, right? Over here.
I appreciate the opportunity to get to ask you this question. And I apologize to my associates from the Memphis Free Thought Association because they've heard me harp on this issue a lot. Yesterday, I listened to the Right Reverend New York Senator Ruben Diaz quote his Bible as he voted to deny basic civil rights to a minority group in this country. I also heard him rebuke a fellow senator who had stated that he left his Bible at the door when he voted on matters of civil issues before the state New York Senate. I've lived for the last 14 months seeing the Roman Catholic Church in Maine and the Latter-day Saints in California fund the fear that took away civil rights in both of those states. Where is your organization, what is your organization's position on that? And I will add that I have a personal email from a county commissioner here who told me that he voted against a county ordinance on non-discrimination in employment because his religion would not let him do any other. What is your organization's position? Are you helping the litigation in California, the Boyce lawsuit? And what are your plans to interfere? Because this seems to me, on a fundamental level, the denial of basic civil rights simply on the basis of religion in this country.
Yeah, you're exactly right. Thank you. There's no real teeth to any censure to these people who violate the Constitution and use their Bible to vote, openly vote. The only real solution we have is political. And how likely is that in a district where everybody's on their side, right? But whenever the government acts as government, we can challenge that legally. We could, if the government is violating state church separation, we can act and do. And of course, we can't take every lawsuit in the world. Sometimes the groups write front of the court briefs to each other on that. So we complain. And by the way, using the Bible to fight homosexuality is basically wrong. Have you ever seen these Christians that have this, what would Jesus do? Whatever, what is it, a pin or something? What did Jesus ever say about homosexuality? Nothing, zero. If you want to do what Jesus did, then keep your mouth shut about homosexuality. Right? It's true that Paul said a few things, the sexist that he was and the homophobe that he was. But even the Old Testament things about homosexuality were not really so much moral issues as they were holiness code, cleanliness issues. Along with homosexuals not being able to enter into the altar, neither can a dwarf. Whose fault is it if you're a dwarf, right? God. Or if your stones are crushed, or if you're a hunchback. There's all these things that the ancient Jews thought wouldn't make you holy enough to approach the altar, right? So homosexuality back then really wasn't so much like this horrible sin crime as it was just that these people aren't good enough to approach, right? Even that's bad enough, right? But yeah, let's all work together and fight on these issues. When a public official abuses their office and uses their personal religious views to affect public policy, that's crossing the line.
Can I ask one follow-up question? Is not the vote against the civil rights in the New York Senate an act, a positive act by the Senate to deny these civil rights?
Yeah.
Rather than just voting in an ordinance that says, no, you can't have the right to marry same-sex couples, go away, They just simply denied that right that had been proposed. Is that not an actionable action?
Well, you can only sue an executive, somebody who executes a law. You can't sue Congress. Congress passes a law, but when then somebody then implements it and executes that law, then that's where the lawsuits happen. And then a lot of these things go to court, because a law can be passed, and then you say, okay, this law is being passed, and let's challenge the execution of that law. Whoever's doing it at whatever level, you name somebody. So yeah, and aren't there some lawsuits going to be coming down in Massachusetts on?
There's a DOMA lawsuit in Massachusetts, and of course there's Prop 8 in California.
Yeah.
But and unfortunately, the New York Supreme Court, their highest court, has already ruled that the discrimination is constitutional under their constitution. Thank you.
I think we should be, in this day of overpopulation, we should be giving awards to homosexuals. We should be putting them up as the great examples of the world. Is there another question here? Or
Quick comment and a question. Your wife is Amy Lori Gaylor, and the book No Gods, No Masters is one of my favorites, so if you could pass that on to her, I'd appreciate it. My question is, as a graduate student, I teach some classes here, and I've tried to engage my students in conversation about reason and, challenging their views on religion in a particular class I taught. How do you see that we can ever do that when we're engaging with people who, and you've had that happen here tonight, we've all seen that, they have this infallible, they have the belief that, this is an infallible truth versus the voice of reason. How do we engage that? Do you have a suggestion?
Yeah. Well, it happened to me. I changed my mind. And it's happened to some of you, right? Mm-hmm. So it's not hopeless. And I think most of us think education is the key. The more you know, the less you believe. So it's probably also true that, and I'm just guessing here, but it makes sense that since most human characteristics fall across a kind of bell curve standard distribution, most of us are going to fall somewhere in the middle. But there's probably some people way over here that really are hopeless. I mean, there's probably some people that there's just not going to be any chance, right? You can talk and talk and talk. And really we should judge them by their actions and not their beliefs anyway. But at a college level, there's always a bunch in the middle. Whenever I do debates and they grade them, most people start at 1 and 10, and then they leave at 1 and 10, but there's usually like maybe 15% that are in the middle. They pick a 3 or a 7, and then they move, right? So it's never harmful to educate. It's never harmful to prompt rational thinking. It never hurts to promote reason and investigation, and it happened with me. And I know a lot of former clergy, in fact, devout. Our guest on this week's Free Thought Radio show, Robert Price, was an InterVarsity, born-again, street preacher type, ordained minister then, later, who then, the mistake he made was he learned too much. He started to actually study the Bible and the documents, and he went, oh, what I was preaching. So, teach it. One of my best friends, Hector Avalos, is a well-respected and admired Bible religion teacher at Iowa State University. He's an atheist, but he's a good Bible teacher. In fact, Christians like to take his class because he's a good Bible teacher. He knows what it actually says in the original languages. So I guess you're saying it feels kind of hopeless sometimes, but if you had made any sense to me back then, I wouldn't have admitted it, but it would have got through. I would have remembered later, oh, what she said. There's no way my ego would have allowed me to say, oh, you're right, silly me, there's no God. But gradually, as time goes by, I think it does make a difference. So congratulations for doing that. How long do we have the room until 9 o'clock? So we have to get out of here in 5 minutes? Okay.
I work with a group of people that by their own admission are slightly to the right of Attila the Hun. Now and then they bring up church-state separation, which I think is a bad idea, because all we've got, me being liberal, is a letter from Jefferson, and that they don't prohibit God in the Constitution, therefore we shouldn't have a church-state separation. And I can't convince these people, but if you were in my situation, what would be the pithiest thing you could say, or a series of things you could say to shut them up for a while?
Well, imagine somebody else's religion running the government. Wouldn't that be the best thing? Suppose Obama really is a secret Muslim. And suppose he's now going to impose Islam on the country, right? Would they put up with that? Would they say, oh, okay. Yeah, the founding fathers were from a European Christian tradition, yeah. So, but our country is not run by the founding fathers. Our country is run by a constitution, and the constitution is preeminent. So you might point out that they owned slaves or that they didn't think women should vote. There were a lot of views of the founders that they did not write into our governing document. But maybe quote some Bible verses about how women should keep silent. If we're going to run by the Bible, homosexuals should be stoned to death. Well, maybe some of them would go for that, right? Or wait long enough and they're going to pass on someday. One last question? Okay,
just a quick. What if? How would you feel if the Memphis City Council decided to rotate the service, and sometimes it would simply be a moment of silence, and other times it would be a wish that we do the right things. Part of me feels like that would be okay, and then part of me feels like it's still sanctioning the notion of asking for, well, there's nothing wrong with asking for guidance from beyond, but there is something maybe wrong with looking beyond and then considering what we do holy or whatever. Anyway, how do you feel about just this moment of silence? Is that even wrong? And then the other thing I just want to suggest is the word secular seems easier to swallow for the religious people than the word atheist or agnostic, because it may not really mean it, but atheist seems to have a threatening connotation. So if you could comment on those.
Yeah, well, maybe they suffered from bad PR, so we can change that connotation. The word secular actually just means keeping the temporal and the religious governments separate. In fact, the first secularists were clergy in Europe when the temporal government was starting to encroach on religious authority, and the religious leaders were saying, we don't want the government encroaching on our authority. They wanted a separation. So you can be a devout believer and be a secularist as far as government is concerned. Today, the word secular has kind of become a loose synonym for non-believers, which is a totally different meaning for the word. But moment of silence is and is not okay, because what the court looks at is intention. There was the Jaffrey case out of Alabama, what was that, 15, 20 years ago? Where they passed a moment of silence, and yet it was considered unconstitutional because the legislators were on record as having a religious purpose. They wanted a moment of silence to get prayer. So that's what made it wrong. There's nothing wrong with a moment of silence. It's just a moment of silence, right? If the city of Memphis could pull it off in such a way that everybody knows that this is private speech, like at a hearing. Anybody can get up at a hearing and say what they want, right? And that's not the city speaking, that's private citizens. If they had maybe anyone who wanted to put their name in a hat and you randomly picked it, and maybe an atheist would get there one day and say, let's all curse God together, If that ever happened and the city were separate from it so that it doesn't look like it's city-endorsed speech, maybe you could pull that off. But what's the chance of them taking that route? Thanks a lot tonight.
Thank you.